Welcome to Easy Sleep, where calm begins, and your journey to restful sleep starts now. The light in Maplewood. Maplewood had always been a town of stories. It was nestled in a valley carved long ago by rivers and softened over the years by time and tenderness. The town square had a stone fountain shaped like an open hand, and around it grew clusters of lilacs, tulips, and thistles, wild and intentional at once, like most things in Maplewood. People used to say the town breathed with its own rhythm. You could feel it in the slow sway of porch swings, in the whistle of the wind through the trees, in the way neighbours leaned across fences just to talk about nothing in particular. It was a place where memories were passed like recipes, gently, generously, without ever needing to be written down. But then, something began to change. It didn't arrive like a storm, though that would have been easier to see. It crept in quietly, like a chill that slips through the cracks of an old window. First, the conversations grew shorter. Then the laughter came less often. The lilacs in the square still bloomed, but fewer people stopped to notice them. The whole town began to carry a kind of weight, not heavy enough to break, but just enough to bow the spirit. It wasn't sadness exactly, or fear. It was something harder to name, a growing belief that perhaps this was simply how things were now. That joy had become something reserved for the past. In a small house near the tree line, just beyond where the town gave way to the woods, lived a boy named Theo. He was 11, and he'd always been the kind of child who felt the world more deeply than he could explain. While other children raced through the streets with kites and chalked hopscotch lines on the sidewalks, Theo spent hours watching the wind weave through the grass, or the way shadows changed shape as the sun moved. He loved the quiet, not because he didn't like people, but because quiet let him hear the parts of the world others often missed. The soft creak of wood settling in the evening, the murmur of a book being read aloud through a window across the street, the sigh of his mother when she thought no one was listening. But even in his quiet world, Theo felt the shift. He saw it in his mother's eyes, once bright and constantly scanning the horizon for beauty, now often glassy with exhaustion. He saw it in his teachers, who still taught, but no longer inspired. He felt it in the air, a heaviness, like a sigh that never fully released. One night, after his mother had gone to bed, Theo sat on the windowsill, his legs curled up to his chest. The moonlight spilled into the room, turning the floor into a pool of silver. He whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "Is this just how people end up? Forgetting the good things?" And though he expected no answer, something stirred. At first, it was just a flicker of light in the corner of his eye. Then it grew brighter, warmer, until it was unmistakable. A small figure, no taller than his hand, hovered near his bookshelf. She had wings like pressed petals, and a glow that seemed to come from somewhere inside her, rather than around her. Theo didn't move. He wasn't afraid. Somehow, she felt familiar. "Hello," she said, her voice like wind across the surface of a still lake. "I heard your question." Theo blinked. "Did I fall asleep?" "No," she replied, "but the town has. What are you?" "I'm a lightkeeper. My name is Leora. I'm drawn to places where the light inside people is flickering, where hope is fading. Theo tilted his head. Are you a fairy? Leora smiled. Not quite. I'm older than fairy tales and quieter than prayer. I come when I'm needed, but I never stay long. My job is to help someone remember the truth. What truth? That the world is still beautiful, even when it's broken. That there's always a place for hope. That every good thought, every kind act, is a seed, and if you plant enough of them, something new will grow. Theo's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something else. Recognition. He knew what it felt like to want to believe in something better, and not know how. So, what do we do? He asked. Leora drifted closer. We begin small, always small. One person, one moment, one thought. Over the next few days, Theo started to notice things differently. Or maybe he just started acting on what he'd always seen. When he walked to school and past the old carpenter's house, he didn't just wave. He stopped and asked about the carved birds in the windowsill. Mr. Remy, long considered the town's grumpiest man, ended up talking for nearly half an hour. You really care about that? He'd asked, surprised. Theo just nodded. I think it's beautiful work, and I bet it helps your hands feel less lonely. That made the old man go very quiet. Then he offered Theo a carving knife. Want to learn? At school, Theo noticed that Eleanor, who always sat in the back and never spoke, wore her sleeves pulled down, even when it was hot. He didn't ask about it. Instead, he gave her a note that said, You're not invisible to everyone. Just thought you should know. She didn't speak to him, but the next day, her sleeves were pushed up just far enough to see a friendship bracelet she'd made herself. After a week, Leora returned. She perched on the edge of Theo's nightstand, her glow softer this time. You're doing well, she said. You've already planted so many seeds. Theo shrugged. But nothing's really changed yet. People still seem tired. Seeds don't grow overnight, Leora said gently, but they remember how to, especially when someone waters them with kindness, or presence, or truth. She held up a small glass vial, no bigger than a thimble. Inside, it swirled with golden flecks of light. These are thought lights, she explained, formed from your good thoughts, your real ones, not pretend positivity, not blind optimism, but hope in motion. What do you do with them? When you've gathered enough, we'll wake the town together. Theo held the vial in his palm. It was warm, like sun on skin. Will it really make a difference? He asked. Leora looked at him, not with pity, but with something deeper. Faith. It already is. By the end of the second week, Theo had changed the way people looked at him. Some adults still gave him puzzled glances, unsure what to make of the boy who smiled at everyone and asked deep questions. But the children, they followed him. He told them stories, not just silly ones with dragons and treasure, but ones about courage, about listening, about how sometimes being brave meant saying, I don't know, or that hurt, or I'm still trying. They listened because Theo didn't speak like a hero. He spoke like someone who had been afraid too. Even the town's mayor, a woman named Marla, who'd lost her brother the previous spring, and had since walked through life like a ghost, stopped one day while Theo was chalking the words, "There's still joy somewhere. Look for it." Outside the library. She didn't say anything, but she knelt, picked up a piece of chalk, and wrote beneath it, "Sometimes it hides in people." Theo smiled. Another seed planted. Another thought light born. As the summer deepened and the days grew longer, Theo and Leora kept going. There were no grand gestures, no fireworks, just a quiet revolution of attention, presence, and compassion. By the end of the month, Leora's jar was nearly full, and Theo, once quiet, observant, and unsure, was starting to understand what true power looked like. It wasn't loud, it was steady. The change was slow. So slow, in fact, that most people in Maplewood didn't even realize it was happening. A bakery reopened its back garden for storytelling afternoons. The library started leaving notes between the pages of borrowed books, small, handwritten reminders. You are not your worst day. This chapter gets better. But just as light begins to spread, so too does shadow notice its shrinking space. Theo felt it first. It started with exhaustion, not in his body, but somewhere deeper. Each day, he still smiled, still noticed, still cared, but it all felt heavier now, like he was carrying something he couldn't quite put down. Even Leora, bright and buoyant as ever, noticed the shift. "You're quieter," she said one night, sitting atop the jar of thought lights, which now glowed golden at the edges. Theo leaned against his window. It feels like, for every person who starts to feel better, 2 more get lost. Leora tilted her head. "What makes you think you're meant to save them all?" Theo looked at her. "Isn't that what this is for? The seeds, the light. I thought, if I just kept trying, it would fix everything." Leora floated closer. "Theo, the point was never to fix. It was to remember. Joy isn't a trophy you win. It's a practice, a direction. And some people aren't ready to walk that way yet. That's not your failure. That's just timing." He wanted to believe her, but something still weighed on him. Later that week, the storm came. The sky cracked open around noon, black clouds rolling in like a slow tide, the kind that steals the colour from everything below it. Wind howled through the streets. Rain hit the ground in sheets. It was the kind of storm that made people stay indoors, hearts clenched without knowing why. The town square, recently vibrant again, stood empty. The chalk messages Theo had written were washed away in minutes. Theo sat on the edge of the fountain, getting soaked. He didn't care. For once, the heaviness outside matched what he felt inside. A voice spoke beside him. "You're not looking for shelter." It was the mayor, Marla, hood up, hair dripping. "I don't think it would help," Theo said quietly. "Everything just goes away in the end, doesn't it? The good stuff?" Marla sat beside him without flinching from the rain. "My brother used to say something. He said, 'Hope isn't soft. It's not about wishing. It's a fight you pick, even when you're losing.' I hated that at first. I wanted hope to be easy, gentle." Theo looked at her. "And now?" "Now I think he was right." They sat in silence as the rain poured down. Across the square, windows glowed with warm light. People peered out, wondering about the boy and the mayor sitting in the storm, but none came to join them. That night, Theo didn't sleep. The next morning, Leora didn't come. Her absence felt like an ache in his chest. He still carried the vial of thought lights in his pocket, but it was cold now. Dimensions. He spent the day moving through town like a ghost. The world had returned to its grey hush. It wasn't that people were unkind. They were just tired again, caught up in the doing, the surviving. Even the children seemed less playful, their laughter dulled. At the edge of the park, Theo saw Elena again. She was sitting alone under the playground slide, holding a folded paper in her lap. When she saw him, she tucked it away. "You okay?" he asked. She shrugged. "What's that?" He nodded toward the paper. She hesitated, then handed it over. It was the note he'd written weeks ago. "You're not invisible to everyone. Just thought you should know." Below it, in a shaky hand, she'd written something new. "That saved me." Theo blinked, throat tight. "I didn't know it meant that much. It was the first time I thought maybe someone saw me, not just looked at me, but saw me." She took the note back, held it close to her chest. "I didn't say thank you," she added. "You just did," Theo whispered. And in that moment, the warmth in his pocket returned. Soft, but certain. The thought lights flickered. That night, Leora returned. Her glow was dimmer than usual, but her smile was steady. "You stayed through the storm," she said. Theo looked at her. "I almost gave up." "But you didn't." He nodded slowly. "I thought I had to do this alone," he said. "But it's not just about me, is it? Other people can plant seeds too." Leora beamed. "Exactly. The light you've carried, it's catching. People are beginning to remember that they can carry it too." She handed him the vial. It was no longer small. It had grown, expanded with every act, not just of kindness, but of truth. "There's enough now," she said. "Enough to remind the whole town. But it won't be fireworks. It won't be sudden. It'll be quiet, gentle, like rain soaking into thirsty soil." Theo smiled, tired but whole. "I think I'm ready," he said. Leora floated to his shoulder. "Then let's rise." The first light of morning crept across Theo's floor like a secret being shared too early. He hadn't slept much. Not out of restlessness, but reverence. Something in him had shifted. The storm hadn't broken him. It had revealed something. That being the keeper of light didn't mean always being bright. It meant believing, even in the dark. His mother was already in the kitchen when he came down. Her hair in a loose braid. Flour on her hands. The smell of warm cinnamon drifted through the room. Theo watched her for a moment, thinking how strange it was that he'd never asked about the sadness in her eyes. It had always been there, like wallpaper, seen, but unspoken. "Mum?" he said. She looked up, surprised. "Morning, honey. You're up early." He walked over and sat at the table. "Can I ask you something? Did you used to feel happy here?" She paused, hands stilling over the dough. "I did," she said. "Before your dad left. Before the noise in my head got too loud." Theo's eyes widened. "Noise?" She smiled, but it trembled. Not the kind you hear with your ears. The kind that whispers, "You're not doing enough. You're not enough." Theo looked down. I hear that too sometimes. She came and sat across from him. Then I'm sorry I never told you that I did. I wanted to protect you from it. But maybe what you needed was to know you weren't alone. For a long time, they sat there. No music, no distractions, just truth. Then she reached out and held his hand. You've been different lately, she said. Lighter, but I see the weight in your shoulders. What are you carrying, sweetheart? Theo didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled the thought light vial from his pocket. It pulsed softly in the morning light. I've been trying to help people remember the good, he said, little by little. And I think it's working, but sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who still believes it's possible. His mother touched the glass. Her eyes filled. Where did you learn to do this? She whispered. He hesitated. From someone who reminds people that light doesn't die, it just hides, and that we're allowed to carry it imperfectly. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out something Theo had never seen before. A small wooden box, painted with faded stars. Inside were dozens of notes, scraps of paper, some in her handwriting, others in a shakier, older hand. What's this? He asked. My father's, she said. Your grandfather. He used to write little reminders to himself, even when everything felt like it was falling apart. She pulled out one and handed it to him. The candle doesn't curse the dark. It shines anyway. Theo's heart clenched. Why did you keep them? Because I forgot the light once, she said softly, and he didn't let me. I think I owe it to you now, to help you not forget either. That afternoon, Theo sat beneath the willow at the top of the hill, the jar of thought lights beside him. Leora fluttered down, quieter than usual. There's a moment before the light returns, she said, where you have to face yourself, the part of you that doubts, that aches, that fears. Theo nodded. I think I'm ready. She lifted her tiny hand and placed it over his heart. What you see next will come from inside you, she said. But I'll be right here. The hill vanished. In its place was a mirror, not one made of glass, but water, a still pool that shimmered even in darkness. Theo stepped toward it. When he looked in, he didn't see a boy. He saw every time he'd almost quit. He saw the chalk words washing away in the rain, the day his father left, the nights he'd cried into his pillow, the guilt of feeling joy when others were hurting, the fear of being forgotten. He nearly turned away, but then the mirror shifted. He saw the carved bird on Mr. Remy's porch. He saw Elena clutching the note. He saw his mother's hand on his, trembling but present. And he saw Leora, patient, waiting, not to lead, but to remind. You are not your doubt, the reflection whispered. You are what you choose in the face of it. Theo reached out and touched the surface. The mirror rippled, and from it a flame rose, not wild, not angry, but calm, steady. It hovered in front of him. This is your core, Leora's voice echoed softly. It cannot be taken, only hidden, and now it's yours to share. Theo opened his eyes. The hill returned. The jar glowed brighter than ever. warm enough that even the trees seemed to lean toward it. Leora sat beside him, not saying anything, just smiling. "You found it," she said. Theo nodded. "I want to give it away." She tilted her head. "Are you sure?" He looked toward the town below. Tired roofs, quiet streets, shadows still long in the afternoon sun. "Yes," he said, "because they don't need to be fixed, just reminded. And I think they're ready." That evening, Theo didn't go alone. His mother came. So did Mr. Remy, holding a bird carved with fresh care. Eleanor walked silently beside him, the note still folded in her pocket. Others joined too, quietly, curiously. The librarian, the mayor, the children who used to trail Theo like shadows. At the top of the hill, they gathered in a circle. Theo placed the jar in the center. Leora hovered above it, wings shimmering. And then, without a word, the light rose. Not in a flash, not in a spectacle, but like a sunrise on a forgotten morning. The glow reached outward, touching skin, bone, memory. And as it did, people began to remember. A kindness given years ago. A song their mother used to hum. The day someone said, "You matter." They didn't cry, not most of them. They just breathed, fully, as if for the first time in years. And in that breath, the light settled. Not in the jar, in them. The next morning, the sky above Maplewood was impossibly clear. Not bright in that glaring summer afternoon kind of way, but soft, like the blue had been washed and wrung out, like it had exhaled. It was a sky that looked rested. Theo sat on his porch swing, his legs tucked beneath him, watching the town below. At first, it didn't look different. But then he noticed. A man in a postal uniform stopped to pick a flower that had sprung up through a crack in the pavement. A teenager helped a child fix their overturned bike, then walked away without saying a word. No recognition needed. Someone had chalked something onto the sidewalk outside the hardware store. Today, I looked up. The sky was still there. Theo smiled. The thought-light jar sat beside him, empty now. And yet, he didn't feel hollow. Maplewood had not erupted in song, nor declared a town-wide celebration, but something in the rhythm of the town had changed. At the cafe on Main Street, people lingered a little longer at the tables. They asked real questions and gave real answers. At school, a new club started, not for grades or sports, but for sharing one good thing each day. No one had officially named it, but some kids called it the Flame Keepers. At the library, the book return box began filling with more than books. People started leaving anonymous notes, reminders, apologies, thank yous. One said, "You smiled at me once, and it kept me here." Theo no longer felt the need to do it all himself. He still left small messages, on lampposts, in library margins, on the back of receipts. But now, when he looked around, he saw that others were doing the same. Mrs. Greeley had started teaching baking to teens after school, sharing recipes her husband had once loved. The mayor began inviting people to story circles in the park, where anyone could speak without interruption for 5 minutes. No rules, no expectations. just listening. Even Mr. Remy, the town's former curmudgeon, had started whittling tiny wooden animals and leaving them on people's doorsteps. Theo found a carved fox on his one morning with a note tied around its neck. You reminded me that hands can still make beautiful things. Leora still visited sometimes, though less often now. You don't need me as much, she said once, sitting on the porch railing, her glow soft in the evening light. That's good. Does that mean you're leaving? Theo asked. She tilted her head. I was never meant to stay. But I'm not really gone either. He looked puzzled. She touched the side of his head. Every time someone chooses light over fear, even for 1 second, I'm there. He nodded slowly. Will the light ever go out again? It will flicker, she said. That's what it does. But someone always remembers. Someone like you, or someone you reminded. That's how it survives. Theo exhaled. It didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like passing a torch. Autumn came quickly in Maplewood. The leaves turned without apology. Gold, copper, amber. The town smelled like cinnamon and old trees and wood smoke. One evening, as the sun spilled across the hills, Theo walked to Willow Hill one last time. This time he brought someone with him. A girl about 8 years old, with tangled hair and wary eyes. Her name was Mira. She'd just moved into the house next door. She never smiled, not once, and she barely spoke in class. But Theo had seen her drawing one day. An entire world sketched onto the back of her math homework. It was filled with strange creatures and bright towers, a world made from her. So he invited her to the hill. They sat in silence as the wind moved through the grass. Mira clutched a notebook tightly, as if afraid it might be taken. Theo said nothing for a while. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her a small, empty glass jar. This is for thought lights, he said. She blinked. What's that? Moments you want to remember. Good ones, or strong ones, or just real ones. She stared at the jar. But it's empty. It won't be forever. Mira looked at him, unsure whether to believe. Theo smiled. You don't have to trust me yet. Just hold on to it, for when you're ready. She nodded, very slowly, and then, for the first time, her fingers curled around the jar. A single firefly drifted by. She watched it, and smiled. Just barely. From the top of Willow Hill, Maplewood stretched beneath them. Still imperfect. Still quiet. But no longer asleep. There would be hard days ahead. There would be forgetting. But now there would also be remembering. And in the memory, the light would live on. The end.